and I want to answer any questions that you guys might have regarding the assignment for this week. The things I want to talk about are, I wanted to get some feedback from you about what you thought art was. How many of you have had a chance to read and look at some of the videos for this module? Alex, you were able to? Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to also write down who is actually here today. So we got, is it Tavia? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Brianna Hofines?
Yeah.
Okay, and Alex.
Yep.
All right, excellent. Sorry, this is probably not the best lighting situation. I'm in the annex of a building. Long, complicated story, but if you guys can hear me okay, we'll be just fine. This week's module, one of the things we address is the idea of what is art, and another one is 4 different kinds of art making. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is you guys have had an introduction to the tools of artistic critique, and I wanted to go over those just a little bit. And I wanted to give a short demonstration. And you guys are only going to be responsible for knowing that for 3 different discussions that we have. And then for the very final thing. So you're not going to have to be aware of it all, or you're not going to have to use it all the time. But it's really important that you're able to talk about it when we have these video discussions. And it's really important that you're able to address it when you write things. But we're not going to have the online discussions for every single thing. Like, for example, the assemblage that you guys are doing this week, or for this week's module, you're going to be posting it, you're going to be turning it in, but we're not going to have a discussion about it. And so those are the 3 things that I wanted to talk about a little bit. So the first one is, what are your thoughts regarding art? What do you think art is? And that's one of the reflection questions. And I just wanted to get your input on that.
It's a self-expression.
It's a self-expression, but that could be true for a lot of things. What's the self-expression that art has that is different than other kinds of self-expression? I think that's a good start.
I think art shows a certain uniqueness. Because I know when I do art, rather than like say my wife does art, I can tell I have a lot heavier of a hand than my wife does, and so it kind of just shows things like that, those differences.
So you're saying that art is a means for self-expression that maybe illustrates a lot more of the nonverbal cues that make a person unique?
Yeah.
Would that be good? Yeah, I think that's completely valid. I like that. How about you, Tavia?
I said it was something that maybe you like create or like perform.
Now, what makes the creation or the performance art as opposed to just doing stuff?
Well, you put a lot of work and thought into it. I don't know, maybe it like starts with an idea.
Okay, I think you're onto something there. And I think perhaps the thing that elevates it to that realm of art is more than just the fact that you're doing it, but you're doing it like Alex said, you're doing it with your own, like a spin or your own conviction to it. Maybe. I think that'd be totally valid as well. How about you, Brianna?
I put down like art is an individual's perspective to how they view things. So
I think that's good too. My grandpa used to say, art is what you see out the window and music is what you can whistle to. And I just thought that was really limited. But do you know where that kind of idea comes from? And I think, Brianna, you're onto something too. Do you know where that idea comes from? Have you ever heard the phrase, art imitates nature? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard that phrase, art imitates nature?
I've never heard it.
No, not really.
Well, it was in use for quite a while, and now the idea is you talk to a lot of people, and they don't see it as art unless they can make a one-to-one reference or correspondence to something real that they can hold in their hand. And I remember growing up, the kid in the class that could draw something so it looked like how everybody else saw it, everybody pointed to them and say, wow, you're a real artist. Do you see a problem with that? I think everybody's unique for a reason. I mean, the universe has spent 17 billion years making you exactly the person you are. So if you produce something that is exactly what anybody else could see out the window at any given point, what would be the point of making it as art? I think there is a school of art called hyperrealism or superrealism where they do that, but they do it, they put a lot more energy into it. They put more into a painting or a drawing that you could ever actually see with the human eye. There was one person, one of these hyperrealists, who would make his brush set, have brushes that only had a single hair. And he would paint with this single hair brush, and there's no way a normal person could see that kind of detail without getting out a magnifying lens. And although it is kind of interesting to have art, have people produce stuff that you could see out the window, without doing something to it specifically that shows people you're looking at it with your own, like Alex referenced, your own unique lens, then what's really the point of making it, is my thought. Now, the super realists or the hyper realists, they are doing something very specific in producing something that is greater than you could ever see with your human eye. So I think that's valid. And I think that there's like photography and a lot of artists that will do things that are realistic, like Greg Olson. They will take things and show them in context or in formats that I don't think anybody could see in the real world. So they're putting their own spin on it. But if you were doing something just that anybody could see, then I think you're kind of missing the point a little bit. What would you say? What do you think to that? You think that's valid? Could you hear the unhappy child? They're feeling better. Don't worry about them. They're getting okay. What do you think about that? Do you think there is something to that idea? If it doesn't have your unique stamp on it, why bother doing it, is what my point is. Now, it's going to sound like I waffle a lot, but the reality is that the context you provide for the art that you do has a lot to do with whether or not that art can speak, I think. If your whole point is to celebrate the little moments of life that are completely normal, but they make life worth living, then I think that could be valid as well. So I think it depends on how you look at it. But when you guys do your own thing, if it doesn't look like you're the one that made it doesn't look like Tavia's art is Tavia's that she made it, or the stuff that Brianna does isn't stuff that Brianna actually had her hands in, or Alex doesn't have his heavy-handed stamp on it, like you said earlier, Alex, then I wonder, is there a point to doing it? I think it needs to look like the unique person you are did it. And I think that's one reason why it's important. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk. Have you, all three of you, read the assignment for the project for this week, the assemblage?
I've read it.
Okay. Then Alex, you and I will have the main conversation then, if that's okay. But I talk
Yeah.
about 4 different kinds of art making. And these are just rough categories. One is additive. Can you guess what additive is? Tavia, what do you think additive means?
I actually read it too. So it's where you
Okay.
like, yeah. It's where you like add stuff together to make like a piece of art.
Okay. And additive would be like an oil painting or working with clay. You're putting stuff on the canvas or you're smushing the clay together. Now, what do you think subtractive would mean, Brianna?
I don't know.
Well, if additive is putting stuff in, subtractive would then be,
Taking something away, maybe.
yes, exactly. Yes. There is a famous artist who, in the 70s, I believe, would take drawings from other artists that he knew and erase them. That is very subtractive. Have you ever seen somebody who starts with like a gray or a black field and then starts erasing lines and develops their artwork that way? Or have you seen like the scratch art where you start off with something, it's basically a single color over another coat? Yeah, and you're removing stuff to get at the artwork. A good example of this might be stonework. When somebody is chiseling away at stone, they're taking stuff away. It's very subtractive. Or another good example of this would be lathe work and woodworking or carving with wood. I also know some people that work with clay that this is one of the tools that they use. A lot of ceramicists use subtractive in their clay work as well. Then a third one was the assemblage. And can anybody describe what assemblage is? It's kind of like additive, but additive, you're using most of the same kind of material. The difference is that assemblage is you're making basically a 3-dimensional collage with lots of different things. Like one of my daughters, she collected those little Cupid doll heads for years and then made a bunch of sculptures where she took the styrofoam heads, wig forms, and just covered them completely with doll heads. I mean, very, very weird. Something like right out of an opening sequence for Multiverse of Madness or something. But that's a good assemblage piece. A friend of mine is an antique dealer, and he will get little odds and ends like hat pins, Victorian hat pins, and dried insects, and taxidermied mice, and he'll put them together in a really weird scene and wrap it with linen thread or something. Just, it looks really odd, but how it all comes together, as weird as that sounds, it's very satisfying to look at. And I don't think it needs to necessarily mean anything, but one of the reasons why I really enjoy it is I can show it to other people and they're completely baffled as to why anybody would call it art. And I think that just the pleasure of getting that confused reaction justifies it for me. I love confusing people. And if you could do something with your friends where you make something that doesn't make any sense at all, and then have somebody else come over, and then your friends and you are all looking at it like, well, yeah, that's so deep, just to confuse the fifth party coming in, I think it's very satisfying. But so assemblage is kind of like a 3-dimensional collage with all sorts of bits. And you can use stuff from your house. You can use bits of sponge. You can use doll parts like my daughter does. You can use, for example, if you wanted to do something that was a statement on just the work that you have to do in this class. There is one artist that will cut pencils into 2-inch segments and she'll sharpen the ends of all the segments, and then she'll stand all those up and seeing all the pointy ends of the pencils and she'll make a design just with that. And that's an assemblage piece. That looks very interesting. The grade that you'll get on this assemblage piece is not whether or not it means something, whether or not it's deep or central to your emotional well-being. It's that you do it and it's well constructed. So I would like you to put some thought in it. If you have a theme, or if you're working with the idea of colors as they're expressed in different plastic extrusions, or maybe you have a whole bunch of cleaning supplies in the apartment where you live, or say, for example, you're sick and tired of gardening, and you have all those tools together, and you make something with that. What I would like you to do is think about it and just spend 3 hours putting it together. And you need to have a photo 1 hour in, a photo 2 hours in, and then a final photo when it's all done. And you can finish it with all sorts of different things. Have you ever worked with a 2-part clear resin epoxy? Okay, Alex has. You could finish it off by putting it in a box and casting it in a block if you wanted to. Or you could spray the whole thing with clear shellac. Or you could maybe even sew it together somehow if you wanted to. But I want to kind of see what you guys come up with. Looking at artists like Betty Saar, I think she's amazing. Another artist that I recommend looking at, and it's not on the list, but look him up. His name is Rauschenberg, R-A-U. I believe it's C-H-E-N-B-E-R-G. What he would do when he was living in New York is he'd go for walks around his apartment, and he would give himself either a time limit or a location. Like he'd either walk around the block in this area, or he would give himself 2 hours. And he would collect all the really interesting things he could find in that space of time. And then he'd go back to his studio and he'd put it together in essentially 3D collages. One of the famous ones, he actually found on one of these walks in New York, somebody had thrown away a taxidermied goat and a tire. So he found those two things and a bunch of other garbage. And then he somehow managed to wiggle the taxidermied goat, into the middle of the tire. And it's now world famous. Yes, that's it. Alex, can you guys see that? And that's just garbage that he found walking around. So I don't expect any of you to make something that fills up your entire living room like that. What I'm thinking is probably something about that size. So keep it really relatively small. But if it involves things like you taking several plastic gloves and cutting the fingertips off and using those somehow, or pencils, or like I said, doll pieces, doll parts, or stuffed animal parts, or things like that. Maybe a good idea would be take $10 and go to the Desert Industries and find whatever kind of crap you can find for $10 and use that. Louise Nevilson is another great artist. Her name is spelled Louise, and Nevilson is Nevelson. She enjoyed going to the furniture companies, the furniture factories rather. She would find all sorts of odds and ends, and she would take all those wood-turned odds and ends and make these huge things that ended up being maybe 12 feet tall and 20 feet long. But you look at them, and some of them look like just medieval organs, and some of them look like cityscapes, just because she would put all these wood-turned odds and ends together in assemblage, and then she would sometimes paint them all the same color. And that looked really interesting. Maybe one thing that you could do as your final step in making your assemblage is spray painting the whole thing. See how that changes it. So these are different ideas for that kind of for that project. And then, do you guys have any questions about that project? But look at those artists that I have outlined and see what they do. Betty Saar is one of my favoriteest people in the whole world. She does stuff that she wants to see that end up being that have an incredible amount of meaning to them. So she kind of backs into being revelatory with her art. I don't think she backs into anything. I think she knows exactly what she's doing. But when she talks about it, she's just incredibly humble. And I think her stuff is pretty amazing. And the third thing I wanted to talk about is the tools of artistic critique. Can you guys name the 4 steps of the tools of artistic critique? I'm not expecting you to. We're going to go into it more next week, but do you guys know what they are? Whenever you come to something that you want to describe or look at or learn about, the first step of those tools of artistic critique, the first step is to describe it. How does it displace the physical world? How big is it? What colors does it have? What are the materials that make it up? How do you think it was put together? What kind of style is it done in? Those kinds of questions. The second step is analyze. What did the artist do to make it? Or how was it made? Maybe, is it complicated? Does it look like it took a lot of time? Or does it look like it was really slapped together quickly? Then the third step is to, and I forgot the word for it, but it's to kind of guess what the artist was thinking when they did it. What's the meaning behind it? Now, unless the artist is right in front of you and you can talk to them directly, it's going to be very difficult to know exactly what the artist was thinking. But as a viewer, you have every right to guess and try to figure it out. Whether or not you're right doesn't matter. You have a right to kind of guess. And then the fourth step is to evaluate or judge the art. Is it successful for what it is? I'm going to walk through this really quick with an example. Can everybody see what this is? All right. It's a paper-made mechanical pencil. All right. So for the description, I'm going to say this looks like it's about 6 inches long. This end looks like it's kind of a rust red color. It looks like it's, as opposed to being fine art, it's functional art because it's a pencil. I can use it as a tool. And it has an eraser at the end. I can manipulate this and the eraser comes out. This clip I can put on my pocket protector. I can hit this button to make the pencil lead come out. So it looks functional. It's about 6 inches long. It's clear plastic. It's white plastic, and it has red in it. So which step in the process did I just do? The very first step, the description. Okay, and the second step is analyze. Now I'm going to guess how the artist made it. I think this looks like everything is very cleanly formed. It doesn't look like it was done by a human hand. So I'm guessing that the artist probably programmed something to extrude the plastic and assemble it with the plastic. There's a lot of precision parts to it. So I'm going to guess that they used probably some sort of a CAD program to design the different dies to mold this. But it looks like it's very precise. So yeah, that's what I'm going to guess, that the artist used computer-assisted design and manufacturing to create this. So that's what I'm guessing. So that was analyzed. And then the next, I'm going to guess what the artist meant by it. Well, I don't know if the artist is really meaning anything by it. It feels to me that since the finger grip is shaped a little bit differently, maybe it's intended to be more comfortable, more ergonomic. So I'm going to guess that the artist maybe intends for this to be used, but to be used comfortably. And with the way that it's manufactured, it looks like it's not going to fall apart easily, so it's going to be pretty sturdy. So I'm guessing that the artist intends for it to be used for a specific or significant length of time. But definitely the artist intends for this to be used as a pencil functionally and consistently. All right, so what's the fourth step? It's to evaluate or judge. I'm going to say, I think that this, as a pencil, as a functional work of art, I think it's successful. Because it does the trick, it fits in your hand, it's not too big, it's not too small, it's not too heavy. It feels like it's appropriate to what the purpose is intended, and I think it's just right. So I believe it is successful. So those are the 4 steps. And I'm sorry, I feel like an idiot because I can't remember the name of that third step. Let me see if I can find it really quick. I do feel Sigh. Oh, I can't find it. So, but those 4 steps: describing, analyzing, guessing what the artist means, and like I said, there's a $3 word for that I just might be having a mental block on. And then the 4th one is to evaluate or judge. And if you do this to one of your own works, what's fascinating is that you start seeing more about what you start seeing more about what you yourself did as an artist, if it's your own work and you're approaching it like this is the first time you've ever seen it. And sometimes you will look at somebody else's work with fresh eyes at this, and it forces you to really see a lot of what they're doing, and it helps you to appreciate their work. And I'll send you guys a video too, where you're confronted with this very odd work of art, and then 2 people go through these steps and describe it and look at it more closely, and whether or not you like it at the end, you appreciate the work. All right, does anybody have any, is that okay? I'm sorry, I'm rushing through this a little bit fast. If you guys, do you have any other questions about this or anything? All right, because connectivity is really kind of weird right here, but next week we'll revisit this a little bit, and I'll make sure and send everybody that description of the 4 tools of artistic critique, as well as that video I was talking about. And I would like everybody to look at that. I'll put that in the 3rd module that you have, so that you get a little bit more of that. But on the comments section for the 1st module, I'm really appreciating what you guys are saying. Again, what is critique not? We talked about the 4 steps of artistic critique. What is the one thing that critique is not? It's being a bully. It's being critical. That's not what art critique is about. And as you go on with the other classes you have to take in your university experience, or as you go on in your professional life, when somebody is looking for help, then you apply tools of critical thinking to help them. That you're not being critical, and you're not being rude to them, and you're not being a bully. I think that's when people hear critique or critical thinking, that's where our minds go to a lot. And like art critics, a lot of the times may seem to just be nasty people because they're just being rude, but that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about critical thinking, which is intentful thinking, where we're asking specific questions of ourselves so we can see specific things in whatever it is that we're addressing. All right? And so far, none of you guys have been bullies, and I really appreciate that. It makes the class such a terrible place if people are nasty to each other. All right, if nobody has any questions, that's going to be it for today. And anybody who's not on this, just remember to submit 3 things that you learned about the video, and you'll get, after you watch it, and you'll get credit for being present as well. But I don't know if you guys noticed, it says no submission, but I write in present, and you get credit anyway. Okay, so all right. I sure hope you guys have a great week. You should see another module in just a couple days. And every week I'm going to try to put on, finish 2 modules for you, so that in about a month and a half, you'll see what the rest of the class will look like, and you can get to it. Is anybody having any problems accessing anything? All right, excellent. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Try not to get arrested.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys.